welcome to the latest edition of Paul McLean Live here on Truth Frequency Radio. It's another Flat Earth Truth Tuesday, as I like to say, and I'm your host, Paul on the Plane. We are continuing tonight with a series of interviews I've conducted with professionals in the Flat Earth community and the empirical evidence and firsthand experience with these proofs that they have that our world is nothing as advertised. Not a spinning, orbiting, corkscrewing, salty space pear, as I like to say, chasing the sun at over 1 million miles an hour. No, a fixed and stationary plane. Just a quick reminder, this is a pre-recorded show as I'm traveling overseas, so I won't be able to take any calls tonight. Still, I hope you enjoy the show. So, tonight, my guest is a gentleman who, for the sake of anonymity, we're going to call him Zach. He has a wealth of knowledge and experience in a particular field that, in my opinion, is just chock full of flat earth evidence and downright proof that our world is flat and fixed. And that is air travel. So without further ado, Zach, welcome to the show. Very much appreciate you taking the time to visit with us and share with us some, what I would again consider hard evidence that the world is not a oblate spheroid or whatever that is, rotating or orbiting.
Good evening, Paul. Thanks for having me on your show.
Very, very, very glad to have you here and to hear about some of your experience here and what you've learned in your many years of air travel. So let's start off by just establishing your credibility. Would you mind just taking a couple minutes and letting us know about your education, your experience? Obviously, you can leave out any specifics, but just in general, your experience and expertise, with this profession of yours.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Well, where do I start? Okay, I started flying. I got interested in aviation about 30 years ago, and 29 years ago, I got my fixed-wing license, then commercial. Flew aeroplanes for about 8 years before switching over to helicopters, commercial helicopter flying in a number of countries. And then I had the opportunity to go back into aeroplane flying, fixed-wing, gained my air transport pilot license, and had the privilege and the opportunity to fly for a very wealthy corporate client, and I was flying his Citation X as well as his Gulfstream G650 around the globe. Oh well, we used to call it a globe then, but now I realise it's no longer a globe. And I've basically been flying both helicopters and aeroplanes commercially, professionally for the last 29 years. And in 9 countries I've been flying commercially. And I hold an air transport pilot license for both helicopters and aeroplanes in 3 countries around the world. And what hit me once about 4 years ago was I was teaching my boss's son to fly, and I went back through the training notes that I was given 30 odd years ago to prepare and study for my theory exams. And those documents, when I opened them up, very clearly stated that for all intensive purposes, for aerodynamics, we assume that the Earth is both flat and non-rotating.
So 29 years of experience, both fixed wing and helicopter.
That's right.
Commercially, personally, etc. And I guess going back to your original training, obviously that maybe did not, that fact that you find in the instruction manuals, right, when you're day one, right, of starting to simulate what it's going to be like when you're actually engaging in air travel as a pilot. From day one, you're to assume, as you're training, that the Earth is flat and non-rotating. But it didn't strike you 29 years ago, did it?
No, and from most of my working brothers and sisters in the fixed and rotary field, they don't register that part. The irony of that is that when we take this assumption from our training manuals, which says that the Earth is flat and non-rotating, there's no second manual that now covers, now how do we deal with that, with the Coriolis effect and 1,000 kilometre an hour spin, yada yada, all the nonsense that we've heard. There's no transition to the real world of a spinning globe. So we remain with the so-called assumption that the Earth is flat and non-rotating. And when I'm planning a flight from one side of Earth, from whether it be from Brisbane, Australia to New York in the States, I don't make any plans for the adjusting of the additional radius of the Earth, and when I'm flying at 35,000, 40,000 feet. And if you look on a ball, the straight line between Sydney to New York, we'd almost be, or Brisbane to New York, we'd almost be overflying Hawaii. And yet, ironically, when I punch in the coordinates and I put in a flight plan for that flight to New York, we fly over Alaska, which would entail a massive dogleg, and I want to fly the shortest distance possible.
I'm curious now, and we all, I think, see this, and I've had family. Well, first of all, I've flown overseas, and you fly north to, they show you that you're flying north to then go back south. For example, as of the airing of this show, I'm in Ireland, and I traveled from the U.S. of A. to Ireland, and same thing. Not as probably as drastic of a curve, up north and down as you would going from Australia to the United States. You
probably would have gone through Greenland then, which again puts a big dog leg in your flight.
It does put a big dog leg in there, but again, you lay it on a even just an azimuthal equidistant map, which is a flattening of the globe, and it works, and it works out perfectly. So I want to get to that experience that you've had, even flying over Alaska, because that in of itself, I guess, if I were to take, this is what I'm thinking just as you're talking then, so you've got this huge dog leg, if you will, on the globe. If you were to then take that dog leg out and straighten it out, how many more miles would that line be, that distance, than if you were to just go on a globe and draw a straight line again from Brisbane to your destination in the U.S.? How many fewer miles would that be, on the globe map? And I bet you there's a big difference.
That's a very good question, and I haven't done that. However, I've done many flights between Sydney and Perth back to Sydney, and it's approximately a 3,000 kilometre distance. Our Gulfstream flies at approximately 1,000 kilometres an hour, 960, 980 kilometres an hour. So it's a 3-hour flight. Now, if you were to calculate in the 8 inches per square mile that we're supposed to be having, it would roughly add around 900 kilometres to that sector. So...
Oh, I see what you mean. The extra distance, because you're not flying over a flat plane. Or
that's right.
Assuming, we're told we're not flying over a flat plane, so you've got more distance to go around a sphere.
That's correct.
But you don't plan for that in your flight plan.
Never have.
And the amount of fuel that you need, even adjusting for going into the wind or with the wind, and so those sort of things, which obviously are going to affect your fuel consumption or your mileage, right?
Absolutely. And we have the jet streams, so that flying in one direction is always slower than another direction, because the jet streams are pretty much the same speed and direction throughout the year. The speed changes somewhat. The jet streams come down and increase in certain parts of the year. However, they're always going at the same speed. In the same direction. So it's always slower to fly from east to west than it is from west to east. Nothing to do with the Coriolis effect. That's just the ground speed related to the prevailing winds. But the higher you would fly, you are adding additional radius to a ball if you were flying around a ball. And our Gulfstream only flies at around 1,000 kilometres an hour, so we can't fly fast enough to cover that distance in 3 hours. So how do we cover that extra distance? There isn't extra distance because there isn't extra radius. It's flat. And all the instruments on board, both a helicopter and an aeroplane, the artificial horizon, which keeps us upright, straight and level, and helps us conduct a coordinated turn, can only work on a stationary flat plane.
Well said. well said. So, going back to the the training that you underwent, and now you are obviously training new pilots as well. So this material you're seeing that you're covering on a regular basis, it starts out with, hey, for the basics, just to get the basics down, as we start to learn how to fly a plane, we have to first of all assume that we are flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth. That's the first thing, right? And then you go through and you learn about what you need to learn. But you said that there's no jump then to quote-unquote reality, or what we're told reality is that the Earth is moving and that it has a curvature to it, which would need to be obviously accounted for, because if all the software is written, for airplane guidance systems and all of the software that helps aid the pilot in controlling the aircraft and doing what he wants it to do and go where it wants to go, is all based on and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all based on a flat, non-rotating Earth. So how can all of the pilot's training and all of the software that he is using and all of the mechanical instruments that he's using are all based on a flat, non-rotating Earth? How do we actually get anywhere if we live on if in reality we live on a spinning, orbiting sphere?
Well, we just can't. It's fairy tale. I mean, I've been flying around at 48,000 feet, and as far as I can see, the Earth is flat. The horizon is flat. There is zero curvature visible. The artificial horizon does not have to be reset or caged every few minutes as we're flying around a curve. I'm not pointing the nose of the aircraft, or the autopilot is not following the curvature. We level out at our assigned altitude, 38,000 feet, and we stay perfectly level for 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever the flight leg is.
We're speaking with Zach, 29 years as a pilot, both fixed wing and rotary, as a pilot, as an instructor, and sharing with us his experience in airspace travel. I guess we call it airspace, but air travel. And what's very interesting to me, Zach, is kind of what you were saying about when you plot a course. So you're flying, and you said you've done this from Australia to the United States. And anybody can go into Google Earth, or even the Mercator projection map, which is the one that's hanging in most classrooms, I think, still in the world, or go on the globe that's sitting in your kindergarten classroom. And if you were to draw a straight line, or take a string, a piece of string, and tape it to Brisbane, and then move that string in a straight line over to San Francisco or something on the west coast of the U.S. and tape it there and look at what the route would be if we live on a globe, and then compare that to an actual flight that we're shown what the flight path is. And like you said, it's going to go over Alaska. It's going to go over Canada. And you think about that, how much further north are we talking about? Alaska is from San Francisco. You should go nowhere near that, Alaska, if we live on a globe, if we're flying based on a globe model of the Earth. So when did this? When did you realize that there's something was maybe it wasn't reconciling with reality? When you were flying over Alaska one time that you were like, this is weird. Why are we flying over Alaska? Is that when it dawned on you?
Ironically, no. About 5 years ago, a very senior captain flying for Swiss Air said to me, "Hey, Stephen, did you know that the Earth is flat?" And it just didn't. I said, "You're kidding me. You're kidding."
Takes you back. You're like, wait, what?
He said, "What? No, come on." He said, "Come on, Zach, you know that the Earth is flat. You've looked outside the cockpit window. Have you seen any curvature? When did your last flight plan for curvature?" And I said, "No, it can't be." And that's when he got me started, and I started looking at Flat Earth Facebook sites and starting to talk to other pilots, and 2 out of 3 pilots said I was completely crazy, and a couple of them also started thinking. And we, the company that I was working for, we have 6 pilots, fixed-wing pilots, 3 helicopter pilots, and I'm dual rated. And we all started talking, and within 12 months of independent research, we all came up with the same conclusion, that in fact we don't plan for curvature, we don't plan for Coriolis, we can't see curvature. None of our flight planning makes any sense on a board, but all our long distance flights make perfect sense on a flat Earth as we understand it, which roughly looks like the UN map. And at least in our little company, we have a unique consensus that all the pilots understand and believe and acknowledge that the Earth is flat. It's non-rotating, it's completely stationary, and it contradicts everything that school children are taught in school.
Yes, I've maintained that ever since I kind of awakened to this reality about our world, is that, if somebody, born and raised without being told or indoctrinated or, continually reinforced that we live on a spinning globe, flying through space, but just based on their own personal experience and they, grew into an adult, and let's say they're 25 years old, and if you were to go up to them and say, did you know in fact that the Earth is spherical? We live on a ball, we live on a sphere, and it's actually spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. It's flying around the sun at over 66,000 miles an hour, and we're chasing the sun through our galaxy at something like 500,000 miles an hour. How do you think that person would respond? Probably the same way somebody that we approach now that believes that we live on that has never heard or never even thought about flat Earth thinks it's crazy. They'd probably react the same. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. I mean, that is complete, utter nonsense. I mean, if you live in the northern or the southern hemisphere, if you take a extended open shutter picture of the stars, they're circling above us. They continue circling around the Polaris, and that has not changed its position for thousands of years. The Aztecs, the Mayans, the Hindus recorded the positioning of the stars, which has not moved at all. And had they been moving, then a sextant, and none of our astronomy would work the way we understand it, because we would be seeing different stars whizzing past us constantly. But that never happens. It's always the same star set circling overhead at a predetermined time that it's been recorded in an ephemeral calendar, which records the space-time continuum, if you like, of the position of those stars above. And that's what makes a sextant work. And that's why ancient seafarers could navigate very accurately across our Earth plane, across the oceans, with a sextant, because these star patterns have a unique pattern that is replicated day in, day out, and it is recorded from ancient history, and even into the future will remain the same.
Exactly. Good stuff. I was curious, we've only got a couple minutes left before we need to take a break, but in the few minutes before the break, how do you respond? You said 2 out of 3 pilots are going to, kind of reject this. Their indoctrination, in my opinion, is so strong that they're going to reject it, maybe without any investigation, which is proof of the indoctrination. But when you would approach them and say, or when they would approach you and say, I'm assuming this is a comeback that you would see, is that, well, the reason we don't have to train for a spherical moving Earth is because the plane's guidance systems, the navigation, the navigation system, it takes care of all of that for us. I don't have to worry about that. That's all taken care of by gravity and by the software. How do you respond to that?
Well, I simply explain to them that, your initial training manuals told you that the Earth is flat and stationary, and all flight planning must be based on a flat, non-rotating Earth. So when does it become reality and we have to start factoring in the Coriolis? Are you aware that the artificial horizon can only work on a stationary flat plane? And when you're flying around at 30,000, 40,000 feet, have you seen any curved horizon? The answer to that is... Only if you're looking through curved windows, I guess. That's right. And there are some planes... Yes, there certainly are some passenger planes that, with pressurization, changing of altitudes, the window does flex and give an appearance of curvature.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed, and it makes perfect sense. When you're sitting on the ground, obviously the cockpit, the cabin and the outside air will be of equal pressure. The door's open, people are going in and out, and they close the door, and they obviously start to pressurize the cabin to allow, to keep you comfortable when they get up to, 35,000 feet or so. But at that point, you have to think about it. There's a lower pressure outside and a higher pressure inside in the cabin, and that's going to... anything that's flexible in any way is going to, and I'm sure the plane probably, the cabin itself is probably flexing at some level. There is a little bit of expansion there, probably very minute because of the strong materials that it's built out of, but the windows are also flexible, made of plexiglass or whatever that material is, and you've got a pressurized cabin. Those will tend to, logically, reasonably, will tend to maybe bulge out a little bit, very, very incrementally, very small. But that in of itself, you are looking through a curved piece of material, and that's going to distort the light that's coming in through that window at some level, and it could make it appear. So I think a lot of people will say, "Oh, I've seen the curve at 35,000 feet." Well, it's because you're looking potentially, you're looking through a curved piece of material that would give you that effect. I think it's important to talk to pilots who have maybe a 180 degree view, because they've got flat windows and they've got the cockpit. They can see left all the way to the right, so they can see a 180 degree view, a much different view as a passenger, I'm assuming, and you would definitely be able to optically see curvature at that point, and it sounds like you don't.
Well, that's exactly right. And if you're sitting in the back as a passenger, if you were to move your head up and down and around, the curvature that is apparent to your eyes would alter. And curvature, if there was curvature out there, would remain fixed. But as you move your head around that window, the curvature changes because the window is curved, not the horizon. And
exactly. And that is, next time you're traveling as a passenger, is to, if you're sitting by the window, is you can, move up, move down, move left and right, and you're going to see that what you're looking at is going to be changing. Is that right?
That's correct. Except up front in the cockpit. In the cockpit, we have around 210 degrees of view, and there is no distortion built into the cockpit windows. I mean, if you're making a visual approach to a runway, you need to see it for real, not a distorted image of what that runway looks like. So for safety and accuracy in flying, we can't have distorted windows in the cockpit like the passengers often do.
So the windows are not concave or convex in any way, shape, or form in the cockpit. And you said you've been as high as 48,000 feet? I would assume if the Earth were a ball of a circumference of 24,901 miles, when you get to that altitude, which is another 2 miles or so above where we would even travel as where most commercial airlines travel, a mile or two higher than that, and still no optical evidence of curvature.
Zero.
When you're looking through a flat window.
Absolutely zero, Paul. And while we're on that point, I've had friends who have experimented with sending balloons up into the upper atmospheres, and I believe some of those balloons have gotten as high as 120,000 feet, and the footage of that was absolutely perfectly flat. Unlike when amateur balloonists send up a GoPro, which has a fisheye lens, and of course we get a constant curvature, which is constantly changing as the lens is dipping up and down, above and below the horizon. The curvature is changing. Sometimes it's curving down and around, representing a ball of Earth, and sometimes it's totally the opposite. And so it sends you a little bit crazy trying to look at those pictures. But I've seen footage of friends who have sent amateur balloons up with a true corrected lens, and it is perfectly flat at every altitude, at every step, all the way up to 120,000 feet.
And I'm also assuming as the balloon is rising up, as it's moving up, that the horizon continues to rise at the same rate.
Yes.
Or appear to rise at the same rate.
Yes, it remains at eye level
of the balloon.
It doesn't go down, dipping down. If we were going up in a balloon or an aeroplane, if we were on a ball, then the horizon would be curving away from us, and we'd have to keep looking further and further down towards that ever dipping away horizon. Which in reality we never do. The horizon is always out there in front of us at eye level, even at 100,000 feet, 120,000 feet. And in my own personal experience flying at 48,000 feet, the horizon is perfectly flat and eye level. It's not down there below us, it's straight out there in front of you, and flat as a tack.
There you have it.
As flat as the eye can see. And all our instruments, all our navigation, long-range navigation, is based on a non-rotating flat Earth. And what that map exactly looks like, frankly, I don't know. But it is something like what the UN map is like. And so when you draw a line from Brisbane to San Francisco and takes you through Alaska, that's exactly the flight plan we fly. So why the hell are we not flying over Hawaii? Because on a ball, that's the straight line.
Well, it's like that news article, which was big in my awakening as I saw that news article about the lady, and I think the flight was somewhere from north of you. I think it was in the Philippines or somewhere in Indonesia. A flight from Indonesia to Los Angeles, I believe, was the destination. But during the flight, there was a woman that went into child labor, and the pilot had to make an emergency landing. And naturally, Hawaii or somewhere in the Pacific, there's got to be some places, where on that route that would be a straight line, that they would have been able to make an emergency landing. But no, where did the plane land? It was in Alaska.
Well, it's not funny. That makes perfect sense on the flat plane as we understand it. And if the map of our Earth is something like what the UN presents in their flag, then that's spot on. They're flying in an exact straight line from somewhere in Asia to, was it LA? It takes you over Alaska.
Exactly. So when have you made that flight from Australia to the U.S. since you had awakened to the reality of this world that we live, or is that you have? Okay. So the first time you were flying over Alaska on that route, it must really have I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, just shook you as, wow, what confirmation that what you've experienced and the awakening that you had experienced to kind of give you that validation that the world is not as it seems, and it is very very much different than what is being advertised.
Well, exactly. And my co-pilot brought along with him, because he was a new believer in the flat Earth model, shall we call it, and he brought a globe with him on that flight. And we were monitoring how we were deviating further and further and further away from the straight line from Brisbane to LA, flying further and further north. And we were just looking at this ball, looking at our navigational equipment, our GPS, and laughing, well, why is the GPS taking us over Alaska in a straight line when that makes absolutely no sense on a ball?
On a ball. Well, great stuff. And Zach, really appreciate you taking the time out to kind of share with us a little bit more evidence, both your personal experience and then your experience and expertise and professional working career in the air travel industry, which is obviously a great flat Earth proof. We have come to the end of another Paul and the Plane Live here on Truth Frequency Radio. We've been visiting with Zach, almost 3 decades now experience as a pilot and an instructor in both fixed wing and rotary aircraft. And just want to say thank you, Zach, for spending this time with us and kind of sharing some insights with us. And it's really encouraging to hear that you have a circle of influence and people that have awakened to this reality that our world is not a sphere that's spinning through space in 4 different directions simultaneously, and we don't experience anything, even though it's curvilinear motion that we should be undergoing, and experiencing the angular momentum change. But they realize that it's flat and fixed, and everything that we experience points to that, all of that empirical evidence. So that's really encouraging to me to hear about that.
Yes. I mean, the simplest thing, to go back to the basics, keep it simple and smart, the KISS principle, trust your senses. You can go up to the height of a building, climb up to a mountain, look out at the ocean. Everything is flat. All our senses, our perception is based on a flat, motionless Earth. It's only the government system and the modern scientists that keep messing with our heads, telling us that we live on something other than that. if we were never told what we were told in school, and we grew up without any knowledge, in-depth understanding of where we live, our senses would very clearly tell us that we live on a flat, motionless plane. We don't experience any motion, we don't observe any motion, and we don't see any curvature at all. And I think the last thing I'd like to just quickly throw in that every intelligent culture that has ever been on this earth, from the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Sumerians, the Germanics, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Australian Aboriginals, the Greeks, the Mesopotamians, the Hebrews, the Jains, who else is there? The Incas, the Israelites, the American Indians, even the Christian Bible, the Babylonians, the Muslims, the Chinese, the Mongolians, the Atlanteans, all stated clearly that the earth was flat and stationary, and they have drawn star patterns that we understand and observe today. So all these ancient cultures already knew what we don't know today.
Thanks, Zach. Really appreciate it. We are out of time. Thanks again for listening to Paul on the Plane Live here on Truth Frequency Radio. Strange World with Mark Sargent is next. Good night, everybody.
See